What's up, everybody, and thank you for listening to Mastering the Mindset. My name is Dariusdotch, and I'm an actor, hip-hop artist, and fitness and life coach. And I'm here to personally help you train and improve your mindset so that you can, 1, become the best version of yourself mentally, and 2, gain focus and motivation to be able to take action and achieve the success in life that you want and deserve. Before we get started, please like and subscribe to my channel, and at the end of this episode, if you liked it, please share it with a friend or a loved one or someone who would benefit from hearing this message. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm ready to go on this journey with you, and that journey begins now. All right, let's jump to it. So today we are going to talk about a strategy that will get you out of that anxious thinking when you find yourself feeling anxious. Now, before we dive in, like I always say, this ain't a podcast where I say, hey, look at me, I have it all figured out, so do what I say, right? No, that's not what this is. That's not what I do. I'm going on a lot of these journeys with you, and this is definitely one I've been working on in real time. I'll be honest, but I have been using these strategies, and I can personally tell you that over time, if you make the effort to work on it, they do work. And I don't want you to believe that these strategies are going to make you perfect and rid you from all anxiety, because that's just not feasible. But what we are going to do is have some things for our tool belt that we can use in those situations. And over time, that time of anxiety will become shorter and shorter and shorter and be much more manageable. So the first thing we need to know, which is probably the most important part of it all, which is the awareness. Being aware in the moment that, okay, you know what? I feel it. I feel anxiousness right now. Not, oh my God, what's happening? I don't know what's going on. No, right? And the thing about being aware, so they say ignorance is bliss for a reason, because it's true. If you don't know about something, then you don't have the awareness to be worried about it. And that's part of this journey. When you focused on personal development and growth and focusing on yourself, you're going to become aware of some things that you need to work on. And by doing so, by becoming aware of these things, and what could happen is we can start to think that these are things that are wrong with us. And ignorance is bliss. We didn't think about these things because we weren't aware of them. And it's important to know that it's not that these things are what's wrong, quote unquote, wrong with us, but these are things we need to improve on. Because at the end of the day, these are things that are given to us by life. It ain't like we did something wrong and now we have these things to work on. No, we are just aware of them. And in reality, everybody has things to work on. For example, one of the biggest things I need to work on is stepping outside my comfort zone. For the kind of growth I'm seeking in my career, I need to get comfortable being uncomfortable and really getting out of my comfort zone in multiple areas. And before I got on this journey of self-development, I didn't realize it, or at least I didn't realize how important it was and how many different ways and how many different areas I need to improve on it. And again, it's not that there's something wrong with me. I just need to work on this. And the same is true for all of us. Anxiety comes from your thoughts. It's not that you were born with it. It's not a chemical imbalance. It's not something that you're stuck with. It's not built in your DNA. It is 100% something that you can work on and something that you can work yourself out of. You don't have to be stuck there forever. And that's important to know. It can get better. So be aware of those moments, of those things and times when you get anxious, and what you should do, and this really works, is to understand this. Like I said, anxiety comes from your thoughts. Those thoughts are in your head, and those thoughts will be much easier if you got them out of your head, if you put them down on pen and pad so you're able to see them. Think about it. If you're trying to solve a complicated math problem, it's way easier to write out that math problem on pen and paper to solve it than trying to solve it in your head. Why? Because if it's complicated, it makes it easier to solve when you can look at it and see it. Same thing when trying to solve all of the complicated feelings and problems with your anxiety in your head. It will be way easier to put those thoughts down on paper and working them out that way. Those thoughts can't stay in your head. They are way too complex. You have feelings about this issue or thoughts about that deadline or feelings about that person or nervousness about this email. And it really gets complicated when things are intertwined and related to each other, right? And if you don't put these things on paper, it will be way harder to work on them. You need to see them. So what I've been doing is I write it down. I become aware of it and I say, okay, what are you feeling anxious about? And I write it down. Then I ask myself, what's the worst that could happen? And I write down all the things that would be the worst if they happened. Then I say, okay, what's the best that can happen? And I write out all the best things that could happen. Then I ask myself, what's the next best step I could take to make myself feel better? So let's go through these 4 series of questions and talk about how to work through them. So the first question, what am I anxious about? And when you write it down, that complicated math problem gets that much easier. It's in front of you and you can see it, you can work on it, and it'll be a lot easier. When it's in your head, it's not in front of you. And once you've identified it and can look at it, you're on the right track. And sometimes just by identifying it, it'll reveal some of that anxiety by default. Because now you've named what it is. It's not a feeling just roaming around in your head. And especially if you write it down and you get to the source of what is truly making you anxious, you might figure out that what you thought was a reason is actually not the real reason at all. It's something else. And that could be a relief as well. For example, let's say you're planning a holiday dinner and you're anxious about it. And you write down all the things that make you anxious about it. You might come to the realization that cooking all the food and getting the house ready for guests isn't really what's making you anxious. But it's the fact that your Aunt Charlene is coming and she makes you feel less than because of how judgmental she is. And that's what you're really anxious about. And by figuring that out, you realize that your anxiety around everything else stems from her. And by dealing with what makes you have anxiety around her, alleviates pressure from having to worry about all the other things that go into hosting a holiday party. Because I don't know if you've ever done that before, but it is a lot of work. And once you figure that out, you can create a strategy and be able to work around it. What's up, what's up, what's up? I want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much for listening to this episode and to also let you know that this podcast is 100% donation driven, which means it's completely funded by you, the listener. So if you like the content I have to offer, I would love it if you can make a donation and you get to pick the amount. I left links in the description of the video as well as my homepage. You can choose which way benefits you the best to donate. And if you need more options, please feel free to email me at dariusdotch@gmail.com. That's dariusdotch@gmail.com. Again, thank you so much for being here and let's get back to it. So identify what that anxiety is, put it down. Now you're able to see it. Now you can name what it really is. That's question 1. So the next question to ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? And a lot of times, and maybe even most of the time, we picture things being way worse in our heads. I mean, way worse. Do you ever notice that? I know you do. We all do it. I don't think it actually has ever been as bad as it was in my head, especially after I look back at something that happened years ago. And what's happening here is our brain is trying to keep us safe and tries to make us avoid as much as possible of the unknown. And this is a fact. Psychologists have studied this, and they say that 85% of the things that we worry about never actually happen. 85%. So 85% of the time, the things we waste our time worrying about never happens. And what feels like around 99% of the time is not even as bad as we imagine it to be. And so when you sit down and you write out what you have anxiety over and you write out what's the worst that can happen, you realize that it's not anywhere near as bad. And so you realize, okay, I'm really just feeling this anxiety because my Aunt Charlene. And okay, what's the worst that's going to happen? She'll say something rude or judgmental. And in reality, it's not that big of a deal because that's just who they are. And you know what? They have to live with themselves being that way, not me. And after a few hours, she'll be gone anyway, and my life will be back to normal, and I will be just fine. Or whatever your answer to that may be. And you'll identify it and feel some relief that, yeah, it's not as bad as I initially was thinking it was going to be. So the first two questions, identifying what it is and identifying how bad it could actually get. And that will, for the most part, alleviate most of that anxiety. And the third thing you should ask yourself is, what's the best that can happen? Now that you looked at the worst, switch to the polar opposite and figure out what would happen in the best case scenario. It's important to show yourself the other side of it and think about how this could too actually happen. Because our brains will, majority of the time, go to the negative anyway. It's how we're wired and programmed as humans. And if we just let it go there, it's only going to make us more anxious. So consciously dial it back and say, okay, here are all the best things that could happen. Maybe Aunt Charlene will come and will be in a great mood, and she'll come and it's going to be a good time, because sometimes she really is a good time. She could come, have a lot of fun. We all have an amazing night. She's not rude, and I won't have any problems. And that's the best thing that can happen. And so now I've looked all the way to both ends of that spectrum, the absolute best and the absolute worst. And I know that in reality, what's going to happen is it's going to fall somewhere in the middle of the two. And that in itself will be some relief. After you've written all this out and realize, okay, it won't be this bad and it could be this good, that middle ground of what actually will happen will be somewhat of a reality check for yourself. And the fourth thing you should ask yourself is, what is the next best step to make me feel better? What is the next best step you can take? What is an action right now in this moment, something I could do, whatever time it is? Sometimes you might wake up in the middle of the night with anxious thoughts and feelings. So at 4 o'clock in the morning, what can I do right now? Or just before people show up to this holiday party, what can I do right now? What can I do next to work through this? What's the next best step? Do I call my Aunt Charlene and talk to her before she gets here? Build that rapport with her? Do I put on a meditation video or meditation music? Do I meditate? Do I do something that makes me happy? Maybe I do a reflection exercise and I look at all the things I've been doing well or that's been happening for me. Maybe you go for a run or do something physical, whatever that may be. Or call a friend, that person you confide in, right? We all have that one person, that one friend we can call and talk to about everything. And again, so we've identified the culprit of our anxiety. We've identified the worst that could happen and the best that could happen. And now we have to take some action. And so this is a really simple formula. There's nobody in this world that will never feel some kind of anxiety or stress. And these questions and steps are the things you can have in your toolbox in the future. Because the easiest thing to do, well, it's not the easiest on your brain, but it's to do nothing and let your anxiety take over. And that's not going to help you. What will help you is if you actively work on it. Just like that anxiety is working on you in those moments, you need to work on it. So if you're a person who deals with anxiety often, save this episode, come back to it as a reminder. But now we have some tools for our tool belt. So when that anxiety comes, we have some steps to take in the moment and we can fight it. We can fight it and kill it and make it better. So the 4 questions. What am I feeling anxious about? What's the worst that can happen? What's the best that can happen? And finally, what's the next best action that I can take that will help me get through this anxiety? And that's how you work through it. So that's what I got for you today. If you like this episode, please share it with somebody that can benefit from this, somebody who is a friend or a family member, somebody who has goals and is trying to improve their lives. So thank you again, and let's get it in.